What completely made up fact, if true, would totally change history? Masturbation made you go blind. Dad walks in on son masturbating. Dad. Son. If you keep doing that you're going to go blind. Son. Dad. I'm over here. Abraham Lincoln was actually 3 midgets standing on each other's shoulders. After his assassination, the 2 remaining midgets went on to become Rutherford B. Hayes. Fun fact. The many children of the 2 went on to become William Howard Taft. Seeds grow in your stomach. This makes me uncomfortable. Life on Earth is a simulation experienced by one person at a time. Every person experiences the same simulation. This sounds surprisingly similar to the egg. The reason the British gave up on fighting the American Revolutionary War was so they could come over with their sexy accents and easily get laid. This worked for me. I married a beautiful American girl. Close bracket. Kraken multiplied prolifically and took over the oceans, threatening all who dared to travel by sea. The Karens delayed every ship by demanding to speak with the manager of said ships. If planet Earth was flat, gravity would be interesting. The ruins of a temple-like structure was found on the dark side of the moon. Time to watch Iron Sky again. A true masterpiece. Greek mythology is real. Imagine the amount of Twitter feuds we'd have to endure from the gods. If everybody expected the Spanish Inquisition. It was expected though. They sent notice in writing that they would be coming. Jesus abused his powers of turning water into wine and became an alcoholic. What about he made everyone else an alcoholic so they don't ask about anything he is doing and follow him everywhere and do everything he says? Like a real cult leader. The alleged lethality of dihydrogen monoxide. That is true though. 100% of people who ingest dihydrogen monoxide eventually die. It turns out that Stalin secretly was into big titty anime girls. Wouldn't change much but would make him a lot funnier to study. The Soviet-Japanese alliance. The US never achieved independence and remained under rules of the European colonies. Just imagine how different the US would be if it was still under Europe's thumb. It's starting to feel like our government has become a George III of our own making. Not gonna lie. The South won the American Civil War. Check out the movie C.S.A. The Confederate States of America. It is a mockumentary about exactly this. And is pretty good. Abe Lincoln gets a funny feeling at the Ford Theater so he turns around and sees his would-be assassin John Wilkes Booth and shoots him. Or he just doesn't go because they were running late anyway. The Secret Service and FBI properly discussed JFK's motorcade route and modified it upon discovering that it passed the Texas Schoolbook Depository, where one Lee Harvey Oswald was employed. And one of Lincoln's bodyguards, the one sitting behind him, didn't go to get a sip of water at Ford's Theater. Also, doctors never attempted to remove the bullet in James Garfield's body. It actually didn't snow in Russia. So the Germans pushed their way through Russia. Something that isn't made up is your cake day. So happy cake day. I know the Russian winter is an awful thing and dumb as hell to try and avoid. But I highly doubt that even if it was a tropical place Hitler would have succeeded. Stalin sacrificed millions of his people and basically destroyed his country on that side of Moscow to make sure Hitler didn't take it. The mud played a more vital role than the snow did. I don't think Hitler, or any of the OKW, expected that level of slash and burn tactics. And just raw destruction of their own countryside. But you are right about it making a difference. The snow made the mud. I think this sentiment would make a lot more sense for Napoleon though. No Russian winter would have made Napoleon march easily into Moscow. Possibly taking down the imperial family much earlier than the Lenin was even a sperm in his daddy's nut. And maybe he would have even avoided both world wars. Native Americans had guns and prevented the colonization edit. Yes, immunity to the diseases too. The point being the natives fending off the colonizers. Throughout the westward expansion, most of them did have guns. Sometimes. better guns than the forces they opposed. The Sioux had about 200 repeating rifles at Little Bighorn, while their enemies had inferior single-shot weapons almost to a man. What they didn't have was the population and industry. Little Bighorn was a tremendous tactical victory that did nothing to slow the conquest of native lands and may have even accelerated it. Richard Nixon was innocent. Then his head wouldn't become president of Earth. Columbus wasn't a murdering con artist and had good relations with the inhabitants of the lands he discovered. All the natives of the Americas had a resistance to smallpox and other diseases. If Eminem's father didn't leave, they kinda made a movie about that. Malibu's Most Wanted. The Nazis begin research into atomic weapons shortly after seizing power. They have a small nuclear arsenal by 1939. Sounds like the prelude to Man in the High Castle. Neanderthals could turn ocean water into ice for walking across. All famous leaders were actually vampires. Except Vlad the Impaler. He's a werewolf. The Native Americans committed genocide of the people who preceded them in the US. Zoroastrianism prevailed over Islam as the dominant theology of the Middle East. It's a generally passive, non-proselytizing religion with little to no influence over the personal lives of its followers. That definitely would have changed the course of history were it true. It would have changed history, but for a different reason than you think. I doubt Iran could have conquered North Africa all the way to Morocco in the same way that the Umayyads did in our timeline, for instance. Or would have if they could, even if the Sassanids were overthrown by someone else. As they inevitably would be. That would have resulted in North Africa likely being considered part of Christendom and thus having closer cultural connections to Europe than to the Middle East. Similarly, it would have meant something incredibly different for Byzantine history, which probably would have resulted in no crusades. In Spain, there would be no Islamic conquest. So the Visigothic kingdom might have remained in power. Or maybe they'd collapse 100 years later instead and Charlemagne would conquer Iberia or something insane like that. Who knows? Super interesting thought experiment. The Earth only has natural disasters because it's cranky. If we all just be quiet for a day, the Earth will calm down and everything will be okay. hum. See 2020 coronavirus aka COVID-19. We stayed inside. Air quality improved. Nobody said anything about documentaries. The US president actually knowing everything he says he is an expert on. There it is again. Manages to show up in every comment section. No matter what the post is about. Caveman lived with dinosaurs. It's on the Flintstones. So it must be true. Carrots help you see in the dark. What if eating lots of carrots give you radar capabilities? There is no evidence of domesticated dogs and or cats. Imagine how lonely that would be like. Living without a dog cat. Society domesticates the fox and the hyena instead. I get a girlfriend. It'll happen. Just put yourself out there and be a normal person. There are lots of girls right now wondering if they will ever get a boyfriend. Also, if you are in high school and your peers are talking about having sex constantly, almost all of them are lying. Earth was a water planet until a massive alien asteroid collided with Earth, creating Pangaea. Henry VIE and Catherine of Aragon had 2 healthy children who lived to adulthood. Henry, Duke of Cornwall, and Mary. Gum takes 5 years to digest. Right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Wouldn't it kind of make sense that if you swallowed gum until you're full, you wouldn't need to eat until it digested? World hunger simply wouldn't exist if this were true. You would still die from malnutrition as you aren't taking in any nutrients. You just wouldn't necessarily feel hungry because your stomach is already full. That if aliens actually made the pyramids and other stuff would completely change the way we look at space. The language barrier though would be so big it would be more of a fear relationship than a good relationship. The Vatican has hid all evidence of extraterrestrial life in order to save mankind from enslavement by those aliens. Or, the Vatican is the extraterrestrial life enslaving us. Oh, this is easy. If the myth that Paul McCartney died in 1966 and they replaced him with a body double was in fact true, I don't think the Beatles would be nearly as remembered as they are today due to the stained legacy that would leave. I've also heard that conspiracy for Avril Lavigne. Nah, Joseph, I didn't cheat on you. It was our God. Yep. It was God that got me pregnant. This one did change history. Politicians' promises made during election campaigns are legally binding. And promises undelivered mean a forfeiture of their position within 6 months. Toothpaste fixed phone screens. Now before you ignore, hear me out. How famous would toothpaste be? We'd have billboards, celebrities, even cults praising toothpaste for being a magic tool. Hitler was a progressive transsexual lesbian. He would be the complete antithesis of all the hate groups who idolize him. 5G spreads COVID-19. After Bill Gates invented time travel in 1857, he went on to win the Nobel Peace Prize for the next 200 years in a row. Yo-yos are actually the weapons of elite assassins and thieves who have covered it by marketing them as toys so no one ever pays attention and launder the money made from jobs. The Greek gods are actually humans from the future who traveled to the past and got stuck. Proceed with genetic experimentation and mingling with the locals. Drama ensues. Technology is misinterpreted. Mythology is born. Gold can be made by mixing avocados, tortilla chips, toothpaste, orange juice, rice wine vinegar with just a tiny bit of mammoth fur. If Earth was 10 feet closer or farther away from the sun, we would all die from heat freezing, respectively. Jesus, Muhammad, and Buddha were all women. They were written as men at the start of the Middle Ages, and all original versions of religious texts were destroyed. Finding a mysterious box on Mars they called Pandora's box, and then someone touched it at the event and split Japan into 3 separate countries, and only an amnesiac physicist and a convicted boxer who has been framed could fix it. If our politicians were in fact lizard folk masquerading as people, well, it wouldn't really change history, but it would make certain events seem more credible. Phantom time hypothesis. For those not familiar with PTH, it says the years 614-911 AD didn't happen in Europe, and we are all really living in the year 1723 right now. That drinking bleach or other disinfectants would in fact destroy the virus without being a problem for the rest of the body. King Arthur was a woman, and the only ones who knew were Merlin, who gave her a fully functioning dick, and the Knights of the Round Table. The singing of birds in the morning can be translated and is actually a never-ending request to see the manager by bird. Karens. If the Cossacks refused to ally with the Tsar in 1600s, all else constant, Russia would be much smaller. History would be unrecognizable. But some possible highlights: Germany negotiates far more favorable treaties after conquering divided eastern states. Emerges as next world power. Communism scattered by World War I. Destroyed by World War II. France, Netherlands, and rest of Eastern Bloc absorbed by Germany after World War II. Treaty negotiated leaves Germany the only major power of Europe with a strong ally in the Ottoman Empire. Who would control the ME? Japan maintains China, Philippines, and has eyes for Venezuela. And at that point I think the Axis would have domain over all known oil sources of the time. So there would just be entirely different seats of power for subsequent proxy wars. The Axis powers combined their 2 nuclear research teams. If the Germans hadn't divided their uranium during World War II, they could have had a working nuclear reactor. But they split it into 2 teams and neither had enough to reach critical mass, the point where a nuclear chain reaction is sustainable. Can you imagine how vociferous advocates for incest would be if they were vindicated by Lot and his daughter's iniquitous perpetuation of their family? Each daughter beguiled their father via intoxication to facilitate intercourse and ensure his compliance. It's still our pay under the religious veneer of righteousness. Animals can actually speak the language of their host area. They just don't because humans wouldn't leave them the FCK alone if we found out that the Greeks were super gay. The Greeks didn't really believe in straight and gay. They had a different set of rules. That included that a man can take pleasure from boning one of his inferiors. But a man can't take pleasure from being boned by his superior. If Greeks were gay the same way mid-20s millennial men are gay, I'm sure stuff would be way different. There really is a sunken continent in the Atlantic Ocean. In the sunken cities are mermaids and mermen with vastly different technology than regular humanity. All the major players in World War I accepted equal complicity to the war, and reparations were equally divided among all nations involved in the conflict. This resulted in no Great Depression. All territories went back to their rightful nations. And World War II still happened, but it is the Soviet Union and Japan against Western Europe, China, and the United States. King Arthur being 100% real? No. Not just based off some long lost king whose story got exaggerated or made up. All the mythology is real. Excalibur, the Lady in the Lake, Merlin, the Holy Grail, everything. Arthur fought the Romans in some of his stories. There's magic and fairies and the like. And in Britain's greatest time of need, Arthur is prophesied to return. Reality has a complexity density limit. In ancient times, there were gods, dragons and wizards and such. But as the human population grew, more and more of the local complexity limit was taken up by brains and the supernatural slowly died out. If we could just get our population down to prehistoric levels, we could have those things again. Aliens came to Earth and spliced their DNA with chimps to create human beings. Humans were used as slaves and bred to work. After they got what they wanted, they gave us religion and left the planet. If H2O was a straight molecule, HOH in reality the two hydrogen atoms are at an angle because two electron pairs on the oxygen push them together. Because of this the molecule has a dipole. One side of the molecule is negatively charged, the electron pairs on the oxygen, and the other positive, the hydrogen atoms which are almost just naked protons, so water molecules stick together. If this bend didn't exist the molecule would be neutral and life as we know it wouldn't exist. If the reason there are so many humans on Earth was because the universe had a max life limit and we were increasing only due to a supernova or black hole wiping out a massive civilization. Cows actually are a race of hyper-intelligent organisms that have taught us to milk them for their uncontrollable fetish for humans. That the government is run by aliens and they use oxygen as a drug to keep us hallucinating and in a zombie state. When we are running out of air it's actually withdrawal symptoms from the oxygen. These last 100 years wasn't the first time humanity got to space and visited other celestial objects. Every single document in the Library of Alexandria had a backup copy stored underground in mint condition in case of it being destroyed. Eating the seeds of plants will make the plant grow in your stomach. I guess you'd never go hungry. All of our lives are just the convoluted plot of a picture book for really dumb giant children. Whales breed via mitosis. We wouldn't be able to hold back the tide of whales. It would lead to societal collapse. Everyone has one extra life. If you die or get killed, you can definitely come back fresh just once and have a chance to turn your life around based on how you died. After taking his first seeps on the beaches of the New World, Christopher Columbus was immediately shot with a Native American laser cannon. Platypuses were created when a flock of radioactive ducks bit a bunch of beavers. Other traits such as electroreception and venom were caused by them absorbing DNA from other creatures they came in contact with while they were still radioactive. As a result of this genetic alteration, platypuses have an unstable endocrine system which they must balance out in order to survive by secretly draining humans of their hormones. This is the leading cause of depression in America. In order to facilitate their ravenous hunger for hormones, some platypuses have attempted to disguise themselves as human politicians and blend in by acting like stereotypical exaggerations. Many of these platypuses have had trouble due to their uncanny disguises and severe misunderstanding of human culture and biology. An example of this is a platypus politician claiming we should inject ourselves with disinfectant to stop the coronavirus. The world's nations lived in peace until the German nation attacked. That would make the Germans firebenders. All the Jews are air nomads. Britain and North America is the water tribes. Northern Africa is the swamp and Sub-Saharan Africa is the Earth Kingdom.